story is a traditional story from the county of Shropshire, where I come from. And it's set about 3 years ago in a little village called Wellington. And it's, well, something you should know about Wellington is it's surrounded by a hill called the Wrekin. And the Wrekin isn't the nicest place to go, especially by yourself at night time. So the story begins when a girl was walking home from school one day and she noticed something unusual on her way. And it wasn't a good unusual, it was a very bad unusual. And she looked and it was a foot sticking out of the bush. And she recognised this foot because it had a tattoo tattooed onto the side of it. And she recognised it because it was from a girl who went to her school who had gone missing about a week ago. And she was quite scared and full of panic. So she ran home and told her mum, and her mum called the police. And the body was buried and life goes on. And a couple of weeks later, her and her twin sister were walking to school and everything was fine. And her twin sister was about 30 seconds younger than her. And she was the bubbly, lively kind of girl that everyone loved. And she was quite the opposite. She was, well, quieter than her sister, for one. And she, well, didn't talk as much. And when they were at school, everything was fine and no one noticed anything different. But, well, as they're twins, you can kind of think telepathically. And she was getting some bad vibes from her sister. And on the way home, she thought that she should ask her sister about it, and her sister said everything was fine. And that night, when they were getting ready for bed, well, they shared a room because they were twins, she noticed that her sister was being a bit unusual. Normally, in the evening, they would talk about their days and all the events that had happened, but her sister was quiet for once. And she decided to leave it and investigate further in the morning. And so they slept. And about maybe 4, 5, 6 hours later, she woke up and to a rustling sound, and she looked and she could just about make out the figure of her sister getting changed into her dress, her Sunday best. Why was she getting changed? And once her eyes had adjusted, she noticed that her sister was all done up, hair and makeup, and she thought that she should probably follow her sister to wherever she was going just to make sure she was okay. And she, well, as her sister left the room, she quickly jumped up out of bed and put on her coat and shoes and left. And her sister had gone out the window. That was unusual. She followed her sister out and hid behind trees and walls and kept herself hidden. And they approached the Wrekin and she saw a young man standing there. This young man she recognised as Jack. And Jack was one of those kind of desirable guys that everyone wanted to go out with. And she noticed her sister walking up to him, looking up at him in admiration as her eyes twinkled in the moonlight. And then she noticed something unusual. On the index finger of her sister, she was wearing a ring, which was also gleaming in the sunlight. And I should probably mention these girls are about 16, 17, so they're not like 10. And she saw the ring and she was a bit confused, but she let it slide. And then she followed them up the Wrekin, and as they were going round, she noticed an unusually large bag on the side of Jack's shoulder. And she wondered what was in it, but, well, she wasn't going to find out anytime soon, she thought. Well, boy was she wrong. As they reached the top of the Wrekin, he pulled out a great huge axe. And, well, I guess you can guess what happened next. And she thought she should tell somebody, but she was a bit curious and thought she should get some better evidence than what she'd seen. And she went back to Jack's house, which was just a single farmhouse, well, in a farm. And she pushed the door open and it creaked. It was quite an old house. And she walked around and investigated, and downstairs there was nothing unusual, everything was normal. And she went upstairs and the stairs were creaky too, like the door. And everything there was fine and normal, and except for one door she noticed on the left-hand side of the landing, which was an unusual door. It looked oddly new and didn't fit in with the rest of the house. And she opened the door, regretfully, and the stench of rotting flesh hit her. And she noticed boxes, small boxes, big boxes, and she decided to open one, and she opened it and a finger fell out. And this was a long finger with the same ring that she'd seen on her sister. And she knew she should run, but it was too late. Jack was already walking up the stairs. How hadn't she heard him? And she decided that she should run because that was the only way out, otherwise he'd kill her too. And so as she ran, she brushed past him and knocked him to the floor. And she noticed the bag that he was dragging, well, she knew what was in there. And she knocked past boxes of arms and hands that held him down as if seeking justice. And she ran and ran and ran, and the hot tears streamed down her face. And she went home and told her parents. And her parents didn't know what to do, so they called round at the neighbours, and the neighbours phoned the police and calmed everybody down. And as they went to investigate, everything was gone. The house was normal. There was no boxes, no Jack. And her sister wasn't there. And, well, no one ever saw her sister or Jack again. And I know that's a true story because that girl was me.